Like we've got some folks joining. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Folks are trickling in. And we've got about a minute or so, so we'll give a moment for everybody to get in the meeting. Thanks everybody for coming in. We're just gonna give it another minute or so to let everybody join. All right. It is 11:30. Got a few guests in the webinar. Eric, are we ready to start?
Yeah, we are. How's everyone doing today? Feel free to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down or whatever, but hopefully you're all doing well. Welcome to our financial fitness and benefits planning webinar presented by me, Eric Gonzalez, and the lovely Miss Rachel Wise, Manager of Marketing and Communications. So before we get started, just because we're anticipating a decent amount of participants, normally I like to keep these informal, but I would ask that people try to hold their questions to the end or put them in the chat so that we can just make sure we're staying on top of things, but at the same time, sometimes questions might be answered a little later in the presentation. So this is our agenda. First, I'll introduce myself and Rachel. Then we'll talk a little bit about financial literacy basics. We'll talk a little bit about budgeting, credit, and then we'll do a brief benefits planning overview before we get to the formal question and answer session. Just note that this is an overview of benefits planning. If you want more detail, we've included a link to our benefits planning webinar that talks about all the work incentives out there for folks on benefits. So my name is Eric Gonzalez. I'm a program manager for Benefits in Action. I manage Benefits in Action's Social Security and benefits planning programs.
Hi, Rachel, Manager of Marketing Communication here at Benefits in Action, and you've probably seen me out in the community doing outreach with our community partners and neighbors, and cheering on navigators like Eric and his awesome work. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Thank you. And now an introduction to Benefits in Action. Just in case you're not familiar with our organization, Benefits in Action is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting our community with the support and resources they need to thrive. And notice how I use the word thrive there. So at Benefits in Action, we're doing more than just surviving, more than living. We're trying to get people to live their best life possible, whether that's through use, applications for, knowledge of, understanding, benefits, and other related programs. So these are some of the many programs that we provide at Benefits in Action. So we do basically all benefit programs at the state, county, and federal level. The only real exception to that is we do not do housing benefits currently, but we do help with Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, Connect for Health Colorado, Social Security, all forms of Social Security, and other benefits. And who do we serve? We serve anyone. We have no income limits. We have no resource limits. We have no vetting requirements. Just if you're in need, you can give us a call and we'll do our best to try to help you. All ages, yeah. So now getting into some financial literacy basics, I just do want to preface this that some of it may seem self-explanatory, some of it may seem contradictory, some of it may seem unrealistic. I just want to mention it regardless because it's technically all of those things and more, but it's good to just know what's going on and what the theories are, even if you may not be ready to put them into practice yet. So some basics are prioritizing your budget. We'll talk more about budgets in a future slide, but just know that everything you spend money on adds up. So a dollar here, a dollar there, that's $2, that's $3. It's not separate. And then planning for unexpenses. The sad fact is that most households in America cannot cover an unexpected $400 expenses. Ideally, you should have enough money to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses if you were to lose your job or have a car breakdown or something like that. But that may not be the case. I'll be honest, I had my water heater break last Friday and I didn't have enough money to cover that. I had to take out a personal loan, but we'll talk a little bit more about loans and credit building so that if that happens, you can bridge those gaps if you have good credit. And then the golden ratio, it's a theoretical formula for how you should be spending your money. So 50% of it should be on your needs, like your rent, your utilities, your food, etc. 30% can be on wants. So if you have any luxury items you want to spend to subscription services that you don't normally need, if you want to give to charity or donate to anyone, that would be in your wants category. And then 20% is just saving. So planning for a rainy day. Here are some definitions. We're going to have two slides on definitions. So interest is basically money you receive or pay for either depositing or borrowing money. So if you deposit money in a bank, the bank will give you money because you are giving them the privilege of handling your money. So you don't have to use their services. They're being a customer of you in essence. Excuse me. It's also money you pay for borrowing money. So if you take out a loan, if you have a credit card, it's not free. I mean, granted, and the interest rates can be high. I mean, what's considered usurious nowadays or considered usury is actually not that much. So you would be surprised, and you want to keep track of the interest rates you're paying if you're borrowing money. And debt, it's what you owe. So, and that's different than credit, which I'm about to get into. But debt is just the flat amount of money that you owe, principal and interest. Credit is actually your ability to get goods or services prepayment based off trust in your ability to pay in the future. And your credit score, that's a score between 300 and 850 that measures the risk associated with lending people money. So generally, the higher the score, the less of a risk that there is with lending you money. So you may get preferential treatment with a higher credit score. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do if you don't have a credit score or if you have a low credit score to try to build that up to get to that, to get to a higher credit score. And then a credit report is just a report of all your activities, your credit situation, and the status of your accounts, whether they are in collection, whether they are paid on time, etc. So why is debt bad? I mean, well, again, debts are not interest free. People don't give you free money. You have to pay interest on them. So, and I didn't include this in the slides, but the difference between principal and interest, principal is the lump sum that they're giving you. Interest is additional money that you have to pay back for the privilege of borrowing that other person's money. And interest on debts can be very high, especially with bad credit. Again, your credit rating is really important because it'll affect the interest rates that are offered to you and the amount of loans you can get, as well as the amount of a credit card balance you can get. And currently, the average credit card interest rate is 22%. Now, if you think about that compared to our current inflation rate, which is 3%, that's a lot of money. So for every $100 you're borrowing, you'd be paying $22 back. In addition to the 100 that you borrowed, of course. So 122 total. That's a lot of money, and that will add up. And then debts can impact your credit and your ability to borrow money in the future. And debt's also associated with mental health risk. I mean, if you're always worried about your finances and you're living in crisis mode, you may not have the best mental health, understandably. And then why is this all relevant? It's because eventually you're going to have to borrow money. Unless you're extremely privileged and extremely wealthy, there are going to be purchases that come up that you cannot afford. So, for example, I could say, raise your hand if you've ever paid cash for a house, and I would assume that no one in this room would raise their hand. So that's why it's important to build credit so you can borrow money to pay for otherwise unaffordable expenses or bridge the gap if an emergency occurs. So, like that water heater breaking, or if you have an unexpected medical bill that insurance doesn't cover, if you get a flat tire and you need a tow truck, that's bridging the gap. Those things do happen, and it will happen. That's just life, unfortunately. Cars will break down, people will go to hospitals, people will lose jobs. What we're trying to do with this presentation is avoid you being the metaphorical deer in the headlight. Now, we're not offering like a panacea or a cure-all solution, but we're offering incremental steps to help you be a little bit more proactive rather than reactive about your finances. So, how do you plan for the unexpected? Well, one way is to put money in a savings or an investment accounts. These are four of the most common kinds of savings and investment accounts, and we're going to go into each one of them in detail to discuss the pros and cons of each and where you might be on the scale. So, a traditional savings account is what most people get at most banks. You can withdraw it at money at any time without withdrawal fees, and up to $250,000 is insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, which is great. It's a lesson we learned from the Great Depression. If for those who don't know about history, in 1929, there was a run on the banks because the stock market crashed, and people went to the bank only to figure out that, hey, all the money's gone. So now we insure most investments to make sure that that does not happen and that if something were to happen, you would still be able to get your money back. The con is that there's a low interest rate. We talked about inflation being at 3% currently. The average interest rate on a savings account right now is 0.39%. So think about that. If you put $100 in a savings account over the course of a year, you would get 39 cents. You're essentially losing money because inflation is the amount that prices go up year over year. So if your money is not keeping up with that, you're essentially losing money. High yield savings accounts. Those are special savings accounts with higher interest rates. Usually they can beat inflation, so 5% or more. That means you're earning money on your account. The con is that that can go down. It's not a set interest rate. It is limited in the number of withdrawals you can make. And often it's step two or three of a savings plan. So you generally need a minimum balance or a deposit into the account to open it. So if you don't have that money to open up the account, it may not be a realistic option for you until you get that money. So a money market account is another type of account offered by banks and credit unions. It's kind of in the middle when you compare a traditional savings account to a high yield savings account, and it comes with debit cards and the ability to make withdrawals and deposit. But honestly, it comes with fees as well as a low interest rate, so it may not be the best option for you. Notice those interest rates of 0.59 and 0.62%. You're still not beating inflation with a money market account, even if you might have a little bit more than a savings account. Now, a certificate of deposit is basically an account where you essentially lock away money. You put it, give it to the bank, and let the bank play with it, and you don't do anything with it for a long period of time, usually a year or longer. The pro is that because the bank has the privilege of borrowing your money, they'll offer you a higher interest rate for locking away that money. It's still insured, just like these other programs. The con is that you cannot withdraw early generally. There are withdrawal penalties. So if you have short-term or immediate expenses that you need and you don't have money that you can stash away for later, this may not be the best option for you. This is another one that might be step two or step three in your budgeting and savings plan. So why are finances hard? And just a note, I'm very intentional with the pictures that I put in my PowerPoint slides. So this is Mount Everest. Why are finances like reaching Mount Everest? You need to spend money. Unless you get like a lump sum or an inheritance, which most people don't get, you're going to be spending money from month to month. And managing money requires self-control, which is difficult. I mean, everyone spends money and everyone buys luxury items. I mean, you shouldn't be penalized for that. And finances are stressful. And if you're acting out of stress, you may lose some of that self-control. And then talking about debt, we talk about those high interest rates on debt. Once you start that cycle of debt, it is a vicious cycle and it's hard to get out. So, what are some budgeting basics? Budgets show how much money you earn, spend, and save. So, it's basically tracking your money in real time so you can see where it goes and have a better idea of how to allocate it. It helps you identify your needs versus wants because honestly, putting stuff on paper is sometimes easier than just having it in your head. And a lot of the budgets that are out there, I mean, you can just really quickly, if you wanted to, go onto like Pinterest or Google and find sample budget terms. They identify them like needs, wants, expenses. So like your rent payment, you really can't live without that. In a pinch, I mean, Netflix is great, but in a pinch, you could probably eliminate it. And it's used to balance your spending and saving and get closer to that golden ratio of 50, 30, 20 that we talked about earlier. Now, what is a budget? At the end of the day, a budget is subtraction. It's simple math. First of all, you calculate your monthly income, but it's your net income, not your gross income. For those of you who may not be aware, your gross income is your pre-tax payments, your pre-tax paycheck, so the amount of your salary. Your net income is what you take home after taxes are withheld from your paycheck. So you calculate the net income, and then you subtract your expenses and see what the remainder is and whether it's a surplus or a deficit. So if you have a surplus, what that means is you're in the black and you have a little extra money that you can put aside for savings or do other things with. If you have a deficit, that means you're in the red and you are getting into debt, essentially. So you want to determine whether you're at a surplus or a deficit early to try to work around this and see what tools might be best to avoid going into extreme debt. Now, these are tips, but I'm going to be honest. The best one to think about is be realistic. Don't try to change everything overnight. So while it's obvious and true, don't overspend on credit cards, there may be times where you have to spend on your credit cards. So don't feel bad if you're doing that. Just take it like an elephant. Eat it one step at a time. Not that I condone eating elephants, but it's just a proverb. And how do you build credit? There's a lot of ways, actually. You can pay your bills on time. You could become an authorized user on a trusted family member's credit card. So what that means is basically teaming up with a family member or a friend who has better credit than you and sharing their credit. So if you're an authorized user, you'll be allowed to make expense purchases off the card, but you won't be responsible for the payments. The family member or friend will be. I mean, the pro to that is you don't have to make the payments and you can build your credit if the person is responsible and makes their payments on time. But this is a team activity. So if you're not using a trusted person's card and that person doesn't pay their payments on time, your credit could go down. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword. You can get a secured credit card. So what that is basically giving the bank a security deposit. that they can draw on if you were to default on an account, but you'll get a line of credit in the amount of the security deposit that you made. So let's say you wanted a $500 line of credit. You would give the bank $500, and then they would give you a line of credit for 500, and you, just like a normal credit card, you would be responsible for making monthly payments on it. The difference is that for a secured credit card, if you default, they're just going to take away from the deposit you made, which is why for lower or no credit people, it's an option. So if you have an amount and it builds credit because you have a record of paying those bills on time, a credit loan. So that's a loan that you take out. It's almost like a reverse loan, not a reverse mortgage, but it's like not how you would think of a loan. So you take out the loan and then you make payments towards it. Once you've made the payments and demonstrated your ability to make payments on time, then you get the loan. So, for example, you want a loan of $2,000. You take out the loan, it's held essentially in escrow, and you, over a period of time, make $2,000 worth of payments towards the loan, and you build up credit by making those payments on time. And then at the end of the period, once you've paid the amount of the loan, they'll give you that $2,000. And if that doesn't make sense, in all honesty, it's a little confusing. And then think broadly in terms of credit. So even if you don't have a credit card, you can pay bills to build credit. So your rent bill, your utility bill, if those are all tracked on your credit report, paying those on time will also help you establish and build credit. So some best practices about credit building. One, keep your credit ratio low. So your credit utilization ratio is the ratio of your credit balance and the amount you've charged to the credit card. So in this example, $1,000 balance versus money spent of 200 is a 20% ratio, which is pretty good. So that's not bad. It's basically what it basically means in layman's terms is don't max out your credit cards. So don't also try not to close old accounts. So credit is determined not only by having accounts, but the length of time you've had an account and your history of paying responsibly. But at the same time, while you shouldn't close an old account, even if you've paid it off, generally, you don't want to have like 1,000 credit card accounts. You want to limit your applications for credit because if you're just opening account after account to chase all the deals, that signifies risky behavior to a credit card company. And then last but not least, diversify your debt. So just like people diversify their stocks and their bonds to safeguard themselves in terms of a certain stock going under, you can diversify your debt and it shows that you can handle multiple types of debt responsibly. So for example, if you have a car loan, a credit card, and student loans, those are three types of debt. And if you're paying all three of those timely, you're showing not only that you can handle one type of debt responsibly, but that you can handle debt as a whole responsibly, and that builds up your credit. So when do you get credit? Normally, you have to have an account that's been reported to the credit bureaus within the last 6 months, and it has to be opened for at least 6 months. And then you have to be alive. And I know that that sounds like a very low bar. The reason why I put that in the slide is because if you get one of those authorized users on your credit card and they pass away, it could affect your credit rating negatively. So finances and benefits, and I want to start from the bottom. Benefits do not replace budgeting, personally. They help. This is another intentional picture. If anyone likes football, I'm using this as a metaphor for getting a first down rather than a touchdown. So benefits don't solve everything. They're not a cure-all, but they do help, just like a first down gets you some forward momentum while you're trying to get to a touchdown. And then, some benefits help you better allocate your budget. So SNAP gives you money for food so that you don't have to worry as much about your food payments and you can use your salary for things like rent. Some benefits give cash to supplement your budget. So if you qualify for Social Security, whether that's retirement, disability, or SSI, you can get some money to offset your costs. Just keep in mind, these payments are not super high. Like the average Social Security benefit for a person is like, I think, $1,700 a month right now. And being realistic, that's not going to solve all your problems. So why do we talk about benefits planning? We talk about benefits planning as a way of managing one's benefits because people need money and you're not, I mean, honestly, unless you've hit the jackpot in terms of your prior earning history with Social Security, you're probably not going to receive a livable income solely through receipt of government benefits. So sometimes you need to combine benefits and working, and if you do that, you need to know how work can impact your benefits. So that in a nutshell is what benefits planning is. It's making an informed decision to continue or return to the workforce while on benefits and see how those work and employment opportunities can impact your benefit. So whether it's getting a job or taking a promotion at work or switching jobs, all of those things can impact your benefits. And then why I'm saying that is because work and benefits are not mutually exclusive. And generally speaking, we're not going to go into it in detail in this presentation, but the government has actually tried to incentivize working and weaning yourself off of benefits such that if you work, you might have some incentives at play and you might get a little bit more than if you just had benefits. But there's a lot to it. So you need to avoid complex issues and you need to make an informed decision about whether and how work might be an option for you. So you want to avoid the financial cliff. And for those who are not familiar with the term, that's essentially considered a sudden loss of benefits associated with a higher earned income that puts you in a worse off situation than you were before you lost your benefits. You also want to make sure that your work doesn't impact your health insurance if possible, because health insurance is really expensive and everyone is going to have health needs in life. And you want to mitigate the possibility of a Social Security overpayment if you're someone who is receiving a Social Security benefit. And if you don't know, a Social Security overpayment is essentially Social Security saying, hey, we gave you too much money. We want it back. And unfortunately, Social Security is not going to act to mitigate that soon. They're not fast. They're actually slow. So they're not going to just say, oh, you worked a month and earned too much money. You owe us $200 now. They may wait a couple years, figure it out on year three and say, hey, you've been working for 3 years. You owe us 3 years worth of benefits. So avoiding that issue on the front hand is one of the best benefits of benefit planning. So how do we do it at Benefits in Action? So Benefits in Action does essentially a subset of all of the benefits planning. So we provide services to folks on the developmental delay and supported living services waivers, DD or SLS waivers. We don't provide it to everyone. That being said, there are plenty of organizations who do. So you don't need to be on one of these waivers in order to receive benefits planning services. I want to be very clear. But what we do is we analyze benefits received, how work plans will impact them. We help you create your work plan and tell Social Security promptly so that Social Security knows about how your income will be affected and will change your benefit accordingly. And we provide these services at no cost. We actually bill Medicaid directly for these services. So these are all examples of benefits that can be impacted by benefits planning. And the reason why benefits planning is important is because each one of these benefits has different rules. It's not just like universal basic income, you have a lump sum. They all have different rules and procedures and administrative hurdles to go through. And knowing how each one is affected would be helpful. So let's say you get Social Security, SNAP, and housing. You would want to know how each of those benefits is impacted by going back to the work. And then these are the common implications of not having a plan in place when you decide to go back to work. If you don't have the right plan and you earn too much, you might lose your benefits. Now, I know a common misconception is that for Social Security, you can work up to a certain amount of quote unquote hours. That is not true. Social Security has income-based limitations for their benefits. So even if you're only working 5 hours a week, if you're over their income limit, you might lose benefits. Again, if you save too much, you might lose benefits. I mean, and that might sound counterintuitive. You would think that the government would want to incentivize savings, but a lot of these benefits have strict resource requirements. So SSI and long-term care, you can only have $2,000 in the bank unless you're married, in which case it increases to 3,000. I can't speak for long-term care, home and community-based services, but if you think about that, SSI, their resource limit has not been updated since 1989. For context, I was three. And different benefits have different limitations. So again, you got to understand all the different benefits. And if you want to learn more about benefits planning, we've got you covered. We've done a detailed benefit planning webinar. It's about an hour long. You can pick and choose the parts that are important to you, where we go over all of the work incentives that are applicable to benefits such as SSDI and SSI. It is geared more towards Social Security recipients, but it provides a lot of helpful information. And if you want to access that webinar, here is the link. So what can you do today? And honestly, you're not going to do all of them today, and that's fine. Please be understand that you don't have to solve any financial woes you may be experiencing overnight. But each of these things are things you can consider and do to start building up a nest egg. So that's all I've got, but I'm happy to take some time to answer questions. I'll keep my screen up so we can go through the questions together. Is there anything in the chat, Rachel?
So there was a question if we could go back to the the financial literacy basics slide.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, guys will also share these slides as well as there will be a recording. We'll put that on YouTube as well for folks to review. And then if anyone has a specific question, we can go ahead and drop that in the Q&A.
Yeah, no, happy to do that for the basics. Sure. So let me go back to that slide and then I'll answer the question. Sorry, it's kind of one at a time while I'm sharing my screen. Yeah. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. I'm happy. We've got till about 1 o'clock. Happy to take plenty of time to answer your questions. Yep. So here are the basics.
So an applicant copy of this sent to email, you download a PDF version of.
I will. I will save it as a PDF and then we can email it out. That is not a problem.
Maybe I can also put a link to it on the YouTube when I put it.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, guys. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, looks like we got one from Nanette Shorter.
Here we are. I'm gonna allow you to talk. There you go.
Thank you, and I appreciate this conversation, Eric. And I'm interested in knowing whether I have, say I build assets in some way, how
Mm-hmm.
it's going to impact this as well.
It really depends. I mean, building assets is generally good unless, and I don't want to discuss your private situation unless you're comfortable
Okay,
with it. But if you're, let's say hypothetically, if you're on the supplemental security income program,
yeah,
you're really not going to want to build assets unless it's something like an ABLE account or a special needs trust. So there are
okay,
times where building assets is counterintuitive.
and basic needs trust. And this is something I can be in private conversation with Benefits in Action.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, for example, say I purchase a car, does that put
Yes.
me out of receiving SSI?
It depends on how many vehicles you have. The general rule is that the first vehicle you own does not count as an asset. So if you have one car only, you're good. It's when you have two or more vehicles that the extra vehicles count at their market value.
Okay. Um, but if I'm on SSI, I
Mhm.
have the dilemma of wanting to build enough
Right,
income to purchase a car, and I prefer to purchase it cash.
right.
That
Yeah,
sounds like it's a dilemma for me.
it does. And I honestly don't have an easy solution for that one. I'm sorry.
Okay,
One thing I will tell everyone is that effective in January, for those of you who are familiar with ABLE accounts, Achieving a Better Life Experience account, normally those you had to prove that you had a disability that started before age 26 to get one. Starting in January of next year, they're raising that age limit to 46. So if you can prove that you had a condition that resulted in you being unable to work before age 46, you can open an ABLE account and you can stash up to $100,000 in there and it won't be counted as a resource for SSI purposes. And you can use money in the ABLE account to pay for basic expenses. Yeah, like a car.
right. Oops.
Thank you for your question, Nanette. Did anyone
And
else?
thank you. I see that there's many ways to expand this, and it'll be unique to each person listening.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's the whole point. It's really not a catch-all. It's just tips that you can choose at your discretion.
All right.
Questions from guests in the room? I'm
Yeah.
not seeing anything in the Q&A. Okay.
No worries. Well, before I'll give another opportunity for questions, but before I do that, and before we do that, I want to do a shameless plug. We're having another webinar next week. It's going to be focused on the basics of government benefit programs, whether it's SNAP, Medicaid, Connect for Health, Medicare, Social Security, as well as possible changes that are coming to those programs through the 2025 Budget Reconciliation Act.
So talk about Connect for Health Colorado. That's currently open enrollment season for that health insurance program. If you're not familiar, Connect for Health Colorado is the state's official health insurance marketplace. And folks can purchase plans through there through January 15th. If they don't have affordable employer-sponsored coverage or make too much money for Medicaid. And we're also currently serving folks through Medicare open enrollment. That ends December 7th. And I believe our appointments have booked up quite fast. If you are someone who is on Medicare currently, we always recommend to either call your local SHIP, your state health insurance assistance program, or 1-800-Medicare, and just make sure that your doctors and prescriptions will be covered in the next year. It's typically for most folks the one time a year that you get to make those changes. So make sure that you check in on your Medicare and update your plan if you need to before December 7th. And there's one more in the Q&A. Will we send a link to sign up for that webinar as well? Yes, we will. And we'll also put that out on our website, on our events page. So stay tuned for that. We did send this particular webinar out in an email blast to folks, as well as put it out on social media. So we'll try to get that blasted to everyone, as well as folks on this call today. Thank you.
Looks like we got two more.
Yeah, that was just that
Oh,
question.
it's just that question. No worries.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. We really appreciate you. You should all receive a recording, but this will also be on YouTube. And for folks that weren't able to join in but did register, they'll get a recording too. So we'll do the same thing next time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Oh, Nanette is raising her hand.
Yeah, you have- think you can speak.
Okay. I have a few more questions, but I think it would take too much time, so I think I'll just call in.
No worries. Well, how about this? Why don't you call
Because-
in and ask to speak to
yeah,
me specifically?
okay, I'll ask to speak with you and for example, if I'm to have 6 months of what I need to survive, that's $6,000, say, and that's
Right.
conservative. And yet if I have SSI, I can't have more than 2,000.
Right. That is a huge, and it's not even a paradox. It's just contradictory.
Yeah, it's a catch-22 from the
Yeah.
group I'm from. So,
Right.
um, and then, and in terms of housing, unless I go into, housing that's specific to, affordability,
Hmm.
if I just try to buy a house or buy some land over time in a private agreement, say in a rural spot, that could be a dilemma too, because,
Yeah, there's a lot of thorns in this one. I'm going to recommend, and I'll even give you my direct phone number
okay,
later if you want,
okay, okay,
and then we can chat.
all right, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we should have some information from the registration so we can reach out directly.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being on. This is only, I think, our second webinar we've hosted on our own, apart from the state library. So thanks for joining, and we hope to do a few more of these. Have a great day.